All right, folks, welcome to Graph Indexer Office Hours number 22. On this momentous occasion, our first office hour since the Curator launch, so I'm sure we'll have lots of things to talk about today. But as per usual, we'll kick off with our regular discussion topics. We have some tentative dates now for the London upgrade for Ethereum. That's scheduled at the moment for block 12,965,000, which comes in at approximately August the 4th. At the moment, since our last office hours, there was only an update to Aragon, as far as I could see. Aragon released a second July alpha 5 days ago, and there's a couple of interesting things in that. I've noted them down here in case somebody here can actually comment on what they mean. There was one new flag added to the client, RPC batch concurrency, and there was also a comment in the changelog about making trace calls faster. Is there anyone who knows anything about those two features? If there's something that would be useful to us as indexers that we should be playing around with? Someone who's maybe already taken a look at them.
So when I read that, I was thinking trace call doesn't benefit us because we only use trace filter, right?
Yeah, I wasn't entirely sure, so I wanted to put it in there in case it was relevant for us, but I think you're right. Trace filter is what we tend to be using. But this RPC batch concurrency thing, I was interested to know what that is. Does anyone know what that's about? Is that about running multiple one requests through parallel RPC channels, or is it something useful to us? Nobody knows. I guess we'll have to find out. One other note on Aragon. Look out for an announcement on the Aragon testing working group. That will be starting soon. And the intention there is to just try and get everybody on the same page who's interested in doing Aragon testing and doing our best to provide useful testing data to the Aragon team as we try and get feature parity as much as possible with Open Ethereum, and ultimately a point in time or a milestone where we can say that Aragon is parity is parity matched with the Open Ethereum client, and we can use either depending on our own personal choices for archive nodes. One other interesting thing I saw, which I haven't noted here, and it's been in the works for a while, is that there's now a torrent file available for the Aragon chain data. If you look at the Aragon Twitter, you'll pick that up. That's another way to get the data faster. So if you're doing a trace node, or like if you're wanting the full fat Aragon node, is something like 3 days to sync. So I think assuming you can get some good peers on BitTorrent, it could be a lot faster to go that way, assuming that you, of course, trust the people that are providing the data in that torrent, the files in that torrent. All right, let's move on to Repo Watch. I saw one question in the chat, I think, around releases. Yeah, Stake Machine is asking about a specific release. So, okay, so this is the piece that Chris Wessels is working on. And I think Chris has talked about what he's doing here before. And the question is, when might we expect that to, I guess, when will we see that in a new release? So, Ford, I'm going to pick on you, I guess, on that one. If you happen to have any or knowledge.
Well, it's on the close and allocate is on master now, so we'll be monitoring network activity on testnet. If people could start using that on testnet, that would be wonderful. And then once we've seen some regular activity with that process, the close and allocate, then we'll move to a NPM release. So that'll promote using it on mainnet. And I'd like to get into this general process and flow of making sure things are running for indexers on the network on testnet, and then moving to mainnet.
Given that many of us use Docker containers and want to kind of point at a tagged image release, can we tag a release and update the networks.md file with this release and hold back on mainnet, or is there some other kind of staging process?
Yeah, absolutely. That's something I've thought about, but we haven't gone into it yet. I'd love to have a separate branch and npm package for testnet, because I do realize many of you, if not like a huge majority, are using the npm packages and not building from master. So I'll link up with Giannis this week, and we'll get a plan for separating those out in the future, and that'll facilitate the process and then experimentation on testnet without it leaking into mainnet.
Great, that'd be very useful for it. I was going to ask about if that meant that we were going to have to compile from source. That's not something I've done with the agent before myself.
Fair enough.
Any other PRs or software-related questions anyone wants to bring up before we move on? Just checking the chat if there's anything there. Yeah, Chris from Torrential Finance brings up another question, which I think has come up a number of times. So at the risk of, beating a dead horse, Chris is bringing up the topic around index or agent transactions. When opening or closing the agent, if the transaction is slow and another transaction is submitted, it has a nonce higher than the previous pending transaction. Is this desired behavior? Because with a higher nonce, it's always executed after the first transaction, results in waiting for low gas transaction and then having additional transactions fail. So this is the reversion piece. We've talked about it before, Ford, right? I guess what's not clear to me is whether that is actually the way it was supposed to work, or should this actually be submitting those transactions with the same nonce in order to overwrite the previous transaction and cancel out the old one?
Yeah, if a transaction timed out, it resubmits with the same nonce. I'm having a chat in the text channel right now. I'm not sure if that's specifically this case. It may be because there was a restart of the agent, and then it tries to look at some other data to understand how to manage the current and pending transactions. So I'm going to ask that we put some of this information in a GitHub issue so I can look further into it. To reiterate, it shouldn't be resubmitting transactions with a higher nonce if the first one timed out.
Got it. Yeah, I think one of the interesting behaviors for indexers, I mean, I do it myself. When you are when you are coming to review your allocations and maybe change them or settle them or whatever, you will often try and kick the agent into action by restarting it. And I'm wondering if that, like you said, is potentially part of the issue here.
We can make the reconciliation interval configurable so that, for people who don't want to wait for the next interval to hit, they can just reduce that.
Yeah, I would love to discuss ways to mitigate that manual restarting of the agent. So if there's like particular slowness under a certain scenario, let's talk about that, and we can try to remedy that a bit so that we can promote more normal usage of the indexer agent. Because some of these like edge case usages and manual restarting and manually submitting makes it more difficult to automatically handle things on the agent side.
I think the flow is typically, update a bunch of indexing rules and be impatient about those actually being reflected on chain. So yeah, if we can make the interval configurable, or alternatively make it kind of event driven so that, if I update indexing rules, that kind of triggers a reconciliation, that might work. But at least that's my feeling about why people are restarting. They just want the agent to reflect the changes on chain as quickly as possible.
Yeah, definitely. And the reconciliation loop isn't too long, but I understand there is a pause there, and it's also possible the agent is doing other things and it's sequentially working, so it's not always clear, how long you might have to wait or why you have to wait. So one big feature that I'm planning right now and I've been wanting to get in for a while is something I'm calling like manual allocation management. So you guys can use the indexer CLI to, for instance, indexer close allocation and do those kind of one-off manual changes and have that be enacted instantly. I'm hoping that'll kind of handle a lot of the use cases for manually closing allocations or trying to get allocations to be managed in an instantaneous event-driven way.
Yeah, one of the reasons I used to restart the agent is because, especially if it has been running for a longer time, it's still tripping over unhandled promise rejections. And my experience is that the closing of allocation goes through, but opening new ones doesn't until you restart the agent. Yeah, right now, when I'm almost daily doing allocations, I don't have the problem as much, but when it was like 28 days, I pretty much always had to restart the agent before I could manage allocations, in particularly opening allocations.
That's very interesting. I wonder if there's some sort of minor memory leak that is leading to problems after an extended period of usage.
It used to be that when the agent loses connection to the Ethereum node for a short while, it goes into displaying this unhandled promise rejections, which over the course of 28 days, there might always be whatever minor glitch or restart of the Ethereum node, and so far that's my understanding of what is happening and why it is happening.
So the unhandled promise rejections, from my experience, that is that related to using the gateway rather than using the local subgraph? Because I certainly used to see those myself, but when I moved over to the local subgraph for the network, basically all of those issues disappeared. All of those errors disappeared.
I've seen a few different variations. Some relating to the centralized network subgraph. Some relating to the collect receipts endpoint, which seems to 500 occasionally. And then, Cohen, double check that I forget the name of the environment variable, but you pass a contract address into the indexer agent, which specifies the token that is like the US dollar equivalent that is used to inject the DAI variable into cost models. And if that value is wrong, and I think it's the USDC contract on mainnet, then you'll get unhandled promise rejections. So that's another one to look out for.
Yeah, I'm not specifying the USD contract, so it should be using the internal one. Of course, if the default is faulty, then yes, then it would apply.
Okay, guys, if we're finished with Repo Watch, we'll move on to Easy to Stake's presentation today. Alex, Andre, welcome.
Hey, thank you. Hi.
Do you want to share your screen, Alex? And then we'll have a little chat.
Yeah, Jim. So basically, I want to show you what we did. Show you all of you guys what we did. I only need like 3-4 minutes. Explain how it works, and after that, if you have any questions, we're glad to answer those.
Excellent.
Yeah. So let me share my screen. I don't know, since this is push to talk, if I change the focus on Firefox window, will it still work? Do you have any idea?
Good question. Not sure. You can only find out by trying.
I will click here and let me know if you can still hear me. First of all, I cannot click anything else. Okay,
we can
I
see
can
it.
change focus. Yeah, I can do it like that. Okay, so we have a short description here on the Graph forum. I want to start reading here the description, but the idea is that we described the tooling. There is a tool that helps you automatically deploy the infrastructure in any public cloud. At the moment, we only support Azure, but we'll support AWS and Google Cloud as well. And using Terraform, it's going to deploy your own Kubernetes cluster there. We have only one file in Terraform where we can configure the requirements. And after that, just say Terraform apply, and it will bring up all the necessary infrastructure that you need. And the second part, we created some Helm charts that integrates the existing Prometheus and Grafana dashboards, the ones that the community made. We also have some tweaks on some of the dashboards, and also, of course, the main, the graph infrastructure, meaning the main containers, and it's deploying on the cluster that you already initiated with Terraform. Helm is going to deploy all the infrastructure there. And there are two resources that we created: the GitHub, where you can find the source code, and also here on GitHub we have the README. If a user that already worked with Terraform and Kubernetes, just by reading the README very fast, it's quite easy to deploy this. So the idea of this README is that it has three simple steps: installing some prerequisites, which is some stuff here, some CLIs, how to deploy the cloud infrastructure using Terraform, and after that, how to deploy the Graph containers using Helm. I don't want to read the README because I guess you all guys can read if you want. But what I want to show you is basically what one person has to do in order to use it. So what are the files that matters in all of this stuff? Because at the beginning, when we all started to use the Graph, there was this mess about how to use the Kubernetes code that was posted by the team, by the Graph team. It was that Kubernetes repository that I think we all met at some point. And after that, there are some members here in the community that created those compose files that were great, and they are still great, and that works. And right now, it's very, very easy to deploy on Docker. And what we wanted to bring up to the table is to have a very easy way to, I don't know if it's correct, easy way, but to have an easy way to deploy with Kubernetes as well. So going forward, there are these two folders. We have the Terraform part. As I said at the beginning, right now we only support Azure. So there will be two new folders for AWS and for Google Cloud. And there is only one file here, meaning which is I have some random highlights here because I think it's because of my key, which is for push to talk. But we have this small file that basically tells Terraform how to connect to your cloud tenant, in this case in Azure. After that, we have the Kubernetes infrastructure that we want to deploy on. So this is some sizing information that you want to bring up in Azure. And the last part is the PostgreSQL that you can use or not. We integrated it, but depending on the user needs, you can basically with this one you bring up a platform as a service PostgreSQL in Azure, and basically you only use the database, but you don't have to manage it. Azure is going to manage it for you. Of course, this comes with some costs. So this is why I said that depending on the needs. I always recommend it for a small database or for not a very, very big load. But when the load is increasing, the cost should be really managed and taken care of because it can go wild here. Yeah. So just by updating these things here and connecting the Terraform to your tenant, you can say Terraform apply, and you have this infrastructure ready. You have Kubernetes ready in Azure. You don't have to do anything else. And the last part, which is deploying with Helm, with the Helm chart we prepared here, deploying the infrastructure. There is only one file that you should only care about, is this values file. This is like an umbrella chart that I'll open it first. So here are all the variables that are in play, let's say, for the infrastructure, for the graph infrastructure, starting with the mnemonic here, the index mnemonic. And after that, there are sections, as you can see here. There are some sections for each pod. A pod in Kubernetes, it's like the Docker container, but it's a bit more complex. But you can just say, okay, the pod is the container. So we have, each section has the agent, then the index node, the query node, the service node, and so on. What's nice here is that you have all the configuration in one place. Of course, like you have in a compose file, let's say that this could be compared with a compose file, but it has some extra Kubernetes stuff, such as, for example, the one that I really love. It's going to the service. You have a replica count, for example. You can replicate the pods just by changing this number. You say, okay, I want 4 service containers, put 4 here, just say update, and you are going to use 4 service containers. Of course, that the infrastructure needs to be able to support all of the load that you want to start on. And here at the bottom of this file, we have the Prometheus configuration and Grafana configuration. A user that want to use this should only edit stuff like it is commented with change this. For example, we give some example for the Prometheus host. You have a host name given by us as an example, but changing this host name and creating a DNS record with your own domain, you, after starting the infrastructure, saying Helm install, these steps are all on the description, you will be able to access it. And one other thing that we prepared, it's a YouTube video. This one is quite big. I don't want to open it now. It has at the end, I realized that it has like almost 1 hour, and we added some chapters. So as I already mentioned before, an unexperienced user or maybe someone that wants to try it for the first time to play with Kubernetes, in 1 hour, you can really understand how to use it, But if you already have some previous experience with this, you can manage all the stuff only by reading the README. And that's it basically. I don't have anything else to add. I want to be fast. Yeah, Andrei, sorry.
Sorry, I also wanted to add some things. So basically, we are speaking about 2 independent parts. First, the Terraform part, which basically deploys a Kubernetes cluster. And after that, a Helm chart that can be used in any Kubernetes solution that you use. You can install it you can install all the software suite using Minikube, for example, on your local computer, or I don't know, on a bare metal approach. Besides that, of course, maybe some of you guys already know what are the benefits of Kubernetes. So it's much easier to scale, it's much easier to monitor, it's much easier to aggregate logs, to search through logs from all the containers. So there are a lot of benefits. Also from a point of view of uptime, so you can have more worker nodes and you can distribute those replicas that Alex mentioned across all the worker nodes. So you basically don't care if one of the nodes goes down. So there are a lot of benefits in using Kubernetes, and the persons that will want to use this approach should read more about it. And regarding the costs, the configuration that Alex presented is somehow static. Only the worker nodes which I was describing earlier, can be scaled but not automatically in a manual fashion. So the costs can increase, but it's not something automatic. It's your decision if you want to scale. It's not the system's decision. Okay, so this is what I wanted to add. Alex, back to you.
If anyone has any questions, I'm done. I have anything else to add? Maybe just I wanted to say that when you said that it is modular, this is how we use it also, because we're using our own infrastructure. We have our own hardware with Kubernetes installed there, and using only the Helm part to deploy on the Kubernetes cluster that we use locally. But speaking about modularity, so you can take only one part and integrate it in your own solution.
Yeah, I think that's very interesting. I think a lot of people here who have not had the chance to gain some knowledge around kubes would be looking to do it on their own infrastructure. But I have a couple of questions for you on your repo at the moment. This repo at the moment. So I'm seeing that you've got mnemonics in the your equivalent, like your YAML file. So there's nothing in here around secret management or anything like that right now. Is that correct?
There is actually, but the idea is that it's a bit complicated. So somehow you want to add the Kubernetes secret into this deployment. So the mnemonic that you saw there, it is going to be taken from that value file and created as a Kubernetes secret. So when you deploy it, it's going to be inside the Kubernetes secret object. But we wanted to keep somehow things easy, and if we chose, for example, a way to tell the user not to put the mnemonic inside the values file, we should have created a separate, let's say, mini tutorial on how to manage the Kubernetes secrets, how to add your Kubernetes secret inside the infrastructure, and after that deploy the rest of the pods. And that was a bit difficult to integrate, since we only wanted to add, not only wanted to add, but since our target was to say Helm install, and that's it. Everything should be ready. So it depends on the approach. But if you by yourself, for example, want to change this behavior, you can do so. So you can choose to comment out the secret. There are some changes that needs to be taken care of.
Well, basically, you need to create the secret before you start the installation.
Yeah, you need to create the secret manually. So is that the Kubernetes secret that allows you to do so?
I think Helm already includes some mechanisms for passing secrets into the... So you don't need to manage the secret lifecycle independently from the chart. Helm actually supports mechanisms for doing that securely.
I don't know, Andrei, do you know anything about this?
Yeah, well, again, there are a lot of ways in which you can manage these kind of secrets, but this is quite used. This approach is quite used. So because basically that secret is stored in a value file that you have full control. This is basically also your approach. The Graph Foundation published some Kubernetes recipes, let's say, that use the same approach. But of course, there are a lot of things that you can do in which you can, I don't know, secure this value file, because basically we are speaking about only about this value file, because once this value is inserted into Kubernetes, you can grant access on that secret based on your role, on your group membership and things like that. So
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I've sent us off on a tangent here with that question, but really what I'm getting at is, I've been through the process of trying to learn cubes a few times now, and what keeps happening is that because it's not an area that I'm particularly experienced in at all, I can deal with Docker and Docker Compose, but it's these pieces of the equation, so to speak, are where you don't want to pick up bad habits from the get go. So I always wonder how, how do I manage my secrets before I even start thinking about deploying any infrastructure? And then you end up going off on that tangent, right? Where there's 100 different potential solutions for doing that. The other thing I wanted to bring up was your Grafana URL. Is that just? I mean, is that with auth? It's got some kind of authentication in front of it, right? It's not just opening Grafana up to the internet.
There are two things to say here. So basically, first of all, inside the values file here, for each ingress that we are setting up, an ingress meaning for each access that we give from the internet inside. Let's go to the Grafana, for example. We have the possibility to whitelist based on the source IP. So inside the video, for example, I'm saying this and I'm repeating this for I think 5 or 6 times, that you should definitely set up the whitelisting here because you don't want the whole internet to access your endpoint. And in Grafana case, there is also set by default a username and a password. For example, if you go here to the README at the bottom of it, where I say grab the credentials, there will be the default Grafana user, but in order to get the password, you have to use the Kubernetes secret command, which is basically going inside that object and echoing the string, which is the password for Grafana, to the terminal. So basically, by default, if you don't set up that whitelist, Grafana is still protected with a user and a password, which is not happening for Prometheus. So for Prometheus, as I said also here, use the whitelist inside the values.yaml to control access.
So it sounds to me like a newbie like me needs to make sure and watch that hour-long YouTube video as well, right?
Well, not quite, So I put this is the reason that I put the chapters there, because there are some chapters with deploying and there are some chapters explaining the files and so on. But inside the deploying, for example, if you just grab the command and enter the deploy command, the rest is just waiting for it to deploy and wait for the okay at the end, But we really tried at each step in terms of security to flag those settings and to try to bring this to focus, As I said, as you can see also here, you use the whitelist inside the values to control access.
Got it. Does anybody else have any other questions for the guys?
I was just going to say this is a great start, but I do feel that this is a little bit too insecure. I don't think there's much benefit to exposing something like Prometheus to the public internet, even with a whitelist. So yeah, this is an awesome start, but yeah, how should we log issues against this repository so that people who are perhaps new to running an indexer and want to leverage a project like this to get started as quickly as possible can do so in a way that is safe? Just for example, Kubernetes has really great authenticated proxy support. So by my mind, it'd be a lot more secure not to expose anything to the internet and just let users use kube control to port forward into that cluster and access whatever they need, whether it's Grafana or Prometheus or Indexer agent, in a secure way.
Actually, Chris, this is what we did, So what you're saying that we can control this, what happens is that we whitelisted it by default. We thought about choosing this to do so. I mean, in order for the user to be able to access the resource without having too many headaches, let's say. So basically, these 4 are the only open entry points inside your deployment. But by going to the values file, for example, if you delete the ingress, I'm not sure if only by commenting the ingress, Andrei can.
Yeah, that's enough. That's enough. So basically, this is the usual approach when speaking about Kubernetes or Helm. You have all these parts in the configuration file. Basically, if you command the ingress part, the ingress will not be deployed for Prometheus, for example. So basically, the communication will be only inside the cluster.
Such as this one
Of course,
here, for example.
you can have a management box that is connected to the same management network as the cluster, the worker nodes, to be more exact. And you can, I don't know, manage your management IPs from there. If you want to connect to Prometheus, if you want to connect to Grafana.
So Andrei, just to give a straight answer, because I'm not 100% sure. So basically, by commenting out the ingress part here from this one, it's not going to. No, it ends here. So by commenting this.
When speaking about values, it's simple. It's much simpler if you just if you just replace true with false. When speaking about values. So if you want to disable it from values, okay, you can disable it from values.
So by putting false here, guys, for example, in this case, you are just disabling the access from internet, and it's just inside your infrastructure. It's not going to be open again.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can see why you guys have chosen to make it as easy as possible, but there's definitely a serious trade-off there between simplicity and like what would you call it?
Security.
Yes, well, yeah, security and best practices. And
indeed, this is the biggest trade-off. Is like the trade-off between let's say security and accessibility, because the more security you add, then less accessible it is. But this can be definitely be changed by just, in this case, changing a variable. And by answering Chris' question about how to raise issues, for example, and stuff like that, we're happy to receive any comments and issues on this GitHub page, because it's public, and we can, for example, handle things if something comes up here.
And what are your plans for the future with this project?
So basically, the next steps is to finish what we already started, meaning in the same by keeping the same approach to enable the AWS and Google Cloud access the Terraform recipes for those two. And after that, there are improvements that can be done. For example, we are going to keep up with the updates, because as all of you guys already know, the graph environment, it's very dynamic, and there are changes such as adding, I don't know, there was that vector part that we started working on the vector pod, and when the decision came to delay the vector implementation, of course that we had to update the setup. So the plan is to keep up with this, and that's being the short term. The long term, I don't know right now what to say.
And we are happy to speak more about security, because this is one of our daily concerns. I really think that using this approach that Alex presented can be quite okay from this perspective. In our case, we are using some public web application firewall in order to better secure these endpoints, and of course there we also have some ACLs defined, but I really don't think that it's a big security concern.
Well, it is a big security concern if it's not configured correctly, Andrei. That's the idea, because the guys.
Of course.
So Basically, what we have right now, it's like a default open. So maybe it can be changed very easy with the default closed by not enabling the ingresses, for example, and force the user that is deploying to enable by what he really needs, and after that to whitelist the stuff that they want.
Well, thanks, guys, for joining us today. It's been interesting seeing what you guys are up to. So if anybody has any comments on the repo, you can add them to the issues there. Guys, how do people reach out to you if they want to get in contact with you directly?
Discord would be great. I'm always available on Discord, and there is also our Telegram channel that's available, and we can talk also there. But
Brilliant.
the fastest way, just tag me or Andre on Discord, and we'll be there.
Excellent. Well, thanks for the presentation today, guys. That was very useful, and looking forward to see what you do with the project in the future.
Thanks, Jim.
Super.
Okay, guys, we have 15 minutes left and a whole bunch of stuff to get through. I think it would be remiss to not get into talking about or having an open discussion about how the curation launch experience has been for indexers. So as everyone's aware, curation went live last week. Last time I looked while I was writing these notes, there were 71 subgraphs on mainnet of varying quality and signal. So I just wanted to really open this up as a discussion to everybody who wants to have a discussion about how this has been for indexers. So I'll give you the couple of things that I've written down, and then people can just join in as they like. So the first thing that's come up for me, and so a lot of people hit this earlier than me, is the allocation risk side of the sort of business decision for indexers. So we've got this very high signal volatility at the moment. It's not as high as it was at the launch, but it's still, I would say, relatively high. And it makes it quite difficult for us to judge the worthiness of new subgraphs, even with signal. Indexers are getting punished, whether it's the right amount or not, I don't know. But you might be looking at a specific subgraph and saying, right, there's space there for me to allocate, and everybody will still make a good return. And then you find that the signal's dropped, or somebody over allocates it and it ruins the rate for you, and you're stuck there potentially for various reasons. Either you're in the first epoch, or maybe it's a subgraph that's going to take a very long time to index. So you might have to make a very difficult decision to sacrifice the rewards and send an OXO POI for that, or you might just sit on it, depending on how much rewards you've accrued. So these things, to me, are making it quite difficult as we stand today, where the signal itself, volume-wise, is quite low. It's making it difficult to make sure that me as an indexer, I'm supporting both my own need to make revenue for my operation and for my delegators, and also try and support new subgraphs without being punished for it, basically, right? For the reasons I explained before. So, there are some subgraphs where I would say I'm trapped in a way. I made a really good return on them in the first couple of days. Now, maybe the returns have gone to nothing because either the signal's gone or people have other indexers have over-allocated to it. So now I have to make a decision. Is it worth hanging on for the long time it's going to take me to sync those subgraphs? Or should I OXO those, move on and find find that the opportunity cost elsewhere is better? I just don't know, to be quite honest. And I don't think I will know until the volatility sort of calms down. And I don't think that's actually going to happen until we have significantly more signal in the network. And these little events that keep happening around subgraphs, being pulled or subgraphs upgrading or failing, each one of those individual events has a much smaller impact on the overall signal on the network. So I think we're in for we've got a lot of a challenge ahead of us, I think, in terms of making good decisions as indexers. So I'm really interested to hear from anyone who wants to share their experiences of indexing over the last week.
Yeah, one thing I would like to ask is that, to add to this, is that I see a lot of non-zero boys on a bunch of these subgraphs that are either failed, either very unlikely to have already be synced by an indexer. So I'm really wondering what's up there, because those non-zero POIs, they might have a very high chance on not being legitimate.
Yeah, so it sounds to me like maybe some indexers are rolling the dice on submitting a POI, getting the rewards, and hoping that they either hit the whatever that period is where you can no longer raise a dispute. I forget what it is now. 28 days, 56 days. They're rolling the dice, right, on whether they get caught. Is what it probably comes down to. So how do you combat that? Well, the dispute system is the only way to combat it, right?
Personally, I'm kind of operating like a double filter approach. So longer term, we hope that curation serves the role of filtering and surfacing high quality subgraphs for indexes. But at least right now, that there's a fair amount of signal that gets allocated even momentarily to subgraphs that are not good faith subgraphs. So I'm kind of trying to filter those myself to just ensure that when I do allocate, it's towards subgraphs that are actually real subgraphs and were also deployed by the teams responsible for those protocols, so that they maintain control of auto migrations and upgrading that subgraph over time.
Yeah, the signal itself is a very difficult thing to, we know that the role of signal is to sort of steer indexers and other, participants to quality subgraphs. And while we're in the throes of the birth of the protocol, or this part of the protocol, it feels like that signal is not high fidelity, I guess would be a diplomatic way of putting it. It can give you some indication, but it's not what I would call the type of a mature signal that we'd expect sometime down the line. And I think this is all about the chaotic nature of building something, or growing something from nothing. And it's just a period of time that we have to go through. So I like your approach, Chris, where you're taking some of that responsibility yourself. I think that's what a lot of indexers are doing.
Yeah, I will say that the first day I was definitely noticing a lot of noise in the signal, and of course it was a little bit chaotic. But looking at it now, it actually kind of feels like the right ranking, which I think is like pretty interesting. I mean, it's not like 100%, but I think the market is actually kind of working itself out pretty decently. So in some ways, I'd say that I'm pleasantly surprised with where it's at now. Of course, there's still a bunch of discussions to how we want to, maybe update curation, but just a small observation. And then also just to kind of echo what you're saying about, I think some of the issues that might come up are really just kind of an inevitability of whenever you start a new mechanism, on a knife edge roll. That initial impulse is going to be a little bit messy, but I think it'll be interesting to see, how reliable the signal can be, kind of, as things settle down.
I think one of the really interesting things for me over the weekend is watching how quickly the curator community has gone from sitting on the sidelines and waiting to being extremely proactive and knowledge seeking and looking for solutions from nothing. Right, I've been really impressed by that. I have to say, more so than any other community, because they kind of had this unleashing, right, on the launch, which no other stakeholder really had that same kind of experience. Like indexers, it was a slow burn, and we had a lot of knowledge about our role and the dynamics of our role as we went into launching mainnet in December last year. Delegators knew quite a bit about their role, did a lot of discovery slowly, but curators seem to have, they're coming to the table really, really quickly. Leaders are already showing themselves. People are stepping up into roles and starting new initiatives. So I'm very, very positive, I think, for the midterm in terms of finding solutions. Yes, curation, we're seeing some things that need improving, but people are already engaging in the governance process to start addressing those. So yeah, generally speaking, I'm net positive, and I agree that when you birth something, it's always going to start out as a chaotic process, and that's where we're at the moment. It's just a matter of grinding through it.
We definitely need to think about setting cost models before the session ends.
Yeah, it's on my list. I think that's a very important one. So for those who maybe haven't caught up in the last 24 hours, there was a few new subgraphs that were introduced yesterday, and a good few indexers jumped on them quickly, but many of them did not set their an initial price in their cost models for those indexing for those subgraphs. So what we ended up with was some subgraphs where the indexers had got up to the chain head, but because they hadn't set cost models, they couldn't serve any queries, and this is causing problems in the playground. I posted a really basic script that anybody can use that's will very quickly help you set up an initial price on all of your cost models that you list out in a CSV file. Make use of that. Maybe you don't start. It's going to take time to optimize your prices, but at least have something in there from the beginning. In the midterm, I think we need a solution to this that's built into the software. So I'd be interested to know, maybe Ford, if that's something you have a comment on, whether you think we should be, in the same way we have a global rule set for, allocations, could we also look at having like an initial price that we set for all of our subgraphs when we first deploy them?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that's a great idea, and something we'll try to get in as soon as we can, which is like a global or default cost model that would then apply to any new allocations that are automated by the agent, as well as some additional logging, so you can be aware of like where you're missing or where you're using the default cost model. And that might take a few days because it's a somewhat extensive change in the agent. So we're brainstorming some more short-term fixes. So potentially doing a fallback on the gateway, where if there's no cost model, it'll use a default cost model. But I want to iterate that we didn't do this initially because for a few reasons, and one of them is that we want to maintain a healthy market and really promote setting effective cost models that fit with your overall strategy and with your infrastructure. So we want to move towards everyone, getting into their cost models and customizing them based on the feedback they're getting on the network. But in the short term, we definitely need to make sure that any new subgraphs are being supported as quickly as possible.
Yeah, so maybe it's more a form of in the long term, it's more of the form of an alert, an error, or something along those lines, rather than actually explicitly setting anything.
Yeah, I think that's a good thing to shoot for in the longer term.
We have a couple of minutes left. I just want to get two other pieces of information in. First of all, we now have a subgraph health channel in Discord. Please use that to report, information about the health of your subgraphs. If it's a long sync time subgraph, that sort of stuff. In the future, I'd hope to see that be something more automated. So we might, have webhooks to allow us to, report into that channel and get a consensus on fatal errors, for example. But for now, it's just a manual channel. Please make use of it. The other thing I wanted to bring up was we did suffer a network subgraph failure. The local for the network's subgraph itself. Is there anyone on the call who can actually update on whether that's been resolved? And do we have a new subgraph that indexers need to be syncing locally?
We have deployed a quick fix for that subgraph, and it's synced on the hosted service and on the gateway indexers, so they can serve that on the network. So we can share shortly the deployment IDs so you all can start syncing that on your own infrastructure.
That's perfect.
So will
So
it be as simple as just swapping out the deployment ID to get that fixed?
Yeah, the main deal is we had to do a grafting yesterday, right? To because otherwise the syncing would have taken too long. So that's why it's not as simple as, you know, it'll take a while to fully index unless indexers can also manually go in and graft starting from the problematic block if they want. But I guess it's somewhat of a trusted operation.
Yeah, so in the indexer agent, you can set your network subgraph to index locally and also the external endpoint. So what you can do is set the external endpoint to the fixed hosted service subgraph, and your agent will use that endpoint until the network subgraph is synced on your infrastructure, and then it will automatically switch over to that. So the upgrade process should be super smooth.
okay, thanks for that, Ford. We're at the top of the hour, everyone. So we'll leave it at that for this week. Thanks to everybody who has contributed today. Thanks to Alex and Andre from Easy to Stake for presenting their grant presentation. We'll see you next week on Office Hours. Bye-bye all.